Turning to Syria, and it's still unclear what shape the country will take now that the Assad regime has gone. Rights organisations are calling on Syria's new rulers to protect the rights of women and minorities. DW Special Correspondent Ibrahim and Rama Jarmakani in Damascus have been talking to women who are fighting for a better future.
In the Syrian capital Damascus, we invited women's rights activists from many different backgrounds to tell us what they want for the new Syria. Despite their differences, they're united in their aspirations for the future state.
I want a state of equality for all citizens, regardless of race, ethnicity, sect, or denomination. I want a constitution that treats everyone equally. I want civilian personal status laws. I want the same custody rights over my children that my husband has.
I want to amend all laws: electoral laws, citizenship laws, inheritance laws, laws around children with unknown lineage. These children should be registered under their mothers' names.
I want a gender-sensitive constitution and laws that give women freedom both in private and public life.
Given these hopes, these women are also worried about what a possible Islamist takeover might mean.
I worry the most about our freedoms as women citizens.
I worry that we have just changed the name of the regime and that we would get a new dictator in a different form. We had a military authoritarian dictator. I worry we will just get an Islamist one. I worry about political Islam. I am not against Islam itself. I am a Muslim.
The worst scenario would be extremism, an experience similar to the Tehran experience after the fall of the Shah of Iran.
Out on the streets, optimism is what reigns among Syrians.
I don't feel afraid. The fear is gone. We have now started to build our future, and Syria is ours again.
I think the situation is better. My children were far away from me, and now my daughter is back in Syria after 9 years.
We as young people hope to rebuild Syria. The current situation is great compared to what we expected.
Everywhere you go in Damascus, you'll see scenes like the one behind me. Men, children, and women celebrating the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Women activists, regardless of background, also tell me there's still a lot that needs to be done for them to get the Syria of their dreams. Back at our gathering with the activists, some are already making plans to make their dreams a reality.
We have been trained. We have attended workshops and so on. But many other women have not had the opportunities we have had. We have had to work in a horizontal way on concepts that we can present to all women for awareness.
We need to work on psychological support, especially for families of detainees and people who have seen their children return as skeletons.
But in the back of their minds, they're also thinking about what to do if things do not go their way.
We now have the freedom to protest, so we will go to the streets and do that. If there are laws against protests, then we will just flee. We'll immigrate.
But right now, these women activists from around the country are building up their network. They know there's work to do.
Well, you saw Ibrahim in that report, and Aya joins us now from Damascus. So welcome. Are women's rights groups talking to Syria's new HTS-led government?
The short answer is there are no formal communications that we know of between women's rights organizations and Syria's current political administration. But it's certainly something that women rights activists, including the ones that you saw we've been speaking to, would welcome. They definitely want to have a seat at the table. They want to be part of Syria's political future. What they also told me is that they want to be able to speak to members of the international community and international organizations. Something that these women told me as well is that there's a lot of talk on the international scene about women's rights and protecting women's rights in Syria. But what they would like to do is more of a dialogue with them, with international organizations, and not just about them. So certainly dialogue both on the domestic level and on the international level is something that these women would welcome, but it's not something that we're seeing happen in a concerted way right now.
And what is this interim government saying about women's futures in Syria?
Well, we've heard the leader of HTS, give sort of very comforting statements about the inclusion of everybody in the new Syria, and not include a lot of specifics. However, there was an interview on a Lebanese TV station just a day or two ago with a spokesperson of the current Syrian political administration, and he gave some pretty alarming statements about how he sees the role of women. So, for example, he said that he doesn't really see women in a role like the Minister of Defense. According to him, women have, biological limitations that would limit them from, exercising a job like the Minister of Defense. He also said that women would not, he doesn't see women in roles, in senior roles in the judiciary, like being judges, when, of course, Syria already has female judges. And he also said that he does not see the new political administration imposing the hijab on non-Muslim women, which of course leaves the question to what about Muslim women like the ones that we spoke to in that report who may not want to cover their hair. So certainly there's some alarming statements coming from some members of the current political administration that are causing quite a bit of anger among women here in Syria already.
HTS has been running Idlib province since 2017. What has life been like for women there?
It has been restricted. There are restrictions on, jobs that women can take. There are restrictions on what women can wear. It's a pretty conservative part of the country. That's according to women's activists that we have been speaking to in Idlib, who say it's not that women are not allowed to work, but sort of their jobs are limited to, project with which they can sustain themselves. Of course, women have borne the brunt of this conflict. Many of their partners and fathers and sons dying in the war, so they've had to sort of economically fend for themselves. But what activists in Idlib tell us is that they'd like to see a more effective role for women in that region as well. So if that's anything to go by, things would have to be different for the rest of Syria, for sure. That's according to women that we've been speaking to here.
Thank you for that, Aya. DW correspondent Aya Ibrahim in Damascus.
And for more on the situation of women in Syria, I can now speak to Rafif Jouejati, Vice President of the Syrian Liberal Party, Ahrar, joining us from the Spanish city of Malaga. Now, there's both hope and concern over women's rights in Syria, as we've just heard from the women activists there in our report. How do you feel? Are you hopeful or concerned?
First, thanks for having me, and I wish to salute the great Syrian people for finally achieving the dream of freedom. As many of the women activists you interviewed said, I'm both optimistic and concerned. I think there's a lot of work to be done, especially as it relates to women. But we have to remember that Syria has been free since December 8th, and a great many acts of progress have been demonstrated around the country. There's still more work to be done.
Now, let's have a look at HTS, who are more or less in charge of the country now. They have been governing since 2017 in Idlib province, and women's rights were restricted there. Do you think that the same will apply the whole country now that they are in charge?
I'm hopeful that they will not. I know that since December 8th, Syrians, men and women, have been able to voice their opinions. And what I've been seeing is an overwhelming majority who want a secular state, who want separation of government and religion, who believe in human rights to include women's rights. And that means equal responsibilities and rights before the law.
Now let's look back for a moment. Can you describe what life was like for women in Bashar al-Assad's Syria?
Well, for women and men, for everybody, it was a culture of fear. So I don't want to go down gender lines here. I want to talk more about the absolute devastation that the Assad regime has caused for almost half a century. Freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, basic freedoms were absolutely denied. And whether one was a woman or a man, the punishment was extremely severe, as you must have seen in footage of the different prisons. So really what we're moving to is an environment where thus far Syrians have had total freedom of speech and expression, and we hope that continues. Now, it's up to us to use that freedom of speech and expression to continually hold the government, whether it's HTS or the successive government, accountable to their promises. I don't believe the Syrian people fought a 13-year revolution to go back to a system of dictatorship.
Now, just today, there's an EU summit in Brussels where leaders will discuss how to deal with the new situation in Syria and the new government. Do you have any suggestions for them?
For the EU government and for all members of the international community, I think the first priority is to lift sanctions because the Syrian people have suffered all these 13 years. I think we need to get more humanitarian aid in. I think we need to remove the terrorist designation from HTS because it is the de facto authority right now, and they've been making tremendous progress. I think they need to be supported while being held accountable, as I said, so that we move forward with cautious optimism. Obviously, restoration of diplomatic relations is going to be extremely helpful. And I think civil society needs to be further empowered to make sure that our rights as citizens are protected.
Now, the US has said it will support a new Syrian government if it protects the rights of women. Do you think this already could help?
Certainly it can help, but I don't think it's up to the US to determine our fate. If protecting the rights of women is the only condition, I'm all for it. But I would like to see the rights of all Syrians protected, not just women, not just minorities. All Syrians should be equal in being protected.
Rafif Jouejati there, the Vice President of Ahrar, the Syrian Liberal Party. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
For more, I'd like to welcome Muzna Dureid from the Syrian Women's Political Movement. Welcome to DW. The UN Secretary General today said that of the many fires burning across the Middle East, that in Syria there is a flame of hope. Do you see hope for women in this moment?
Yes, for sure. The political situation in Syria was frozen for years and years, and we've been stuck in a very difficult situation where there's no any development towards the freedom of Syrians and specifically Syrian women. So now we have another new opportunity for all of us and specifically women to build a new Syria based on that protects human rights and women's rights as other countries.
What issues specific to women do you think could improve in a new Syria?
Yeah, in Syria we need to work on the constitution to ensure that our constitution protects women's rights in terms of the rights of religions, the rights, political rights, and all what is related to the land's rights and properties. And also we need to work on the reform of the national law, which is related to citizenship, passing citizenship to women's children, as well also all what what is related to inheritance from their families and their husbands. So a lot should be done to reform the laws and all what's related to women's rights in Syria for now and for the future as well.
Now, many have warned that there could be trouble from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It has recently tried to tone down its rhetoric. It's promised things like protection for minority groups. In your view, what do they have to offer women in Syria?
First, we need to be vigilant. It's just like we can't guarantee just words, and we need to see like actions. And this is like by providing like a space for women to be included in the all of the like future governments and having also quota for women to ensure like their participation at the table. So until now, we haven't seen any of these, just like we have now what is called the care government or the transitional council, where there is like zero participation of women. We have seen gender apartheid in Iran and in Afghanistan, and we need to be vigilant to protect like what we have done over the previous like 14 years. And specifically, like Syrian women's political movement have been working over years since the beginning of the Syrian revolution on defining all of the politics in Syria from a woman's perspective and from feminist perspectives. And this is like to be used during this time, the time of transition, where a lot should be done and a lot of uncertainty we are seeing now. So yeah, we need to see like women are leading the country, being part of the new government, also being part of the candidate for the elections, presidential elections, and what is coming on also to reform the constitution.
Now, you mentioned that comparison to an Afghanistan-style situation. The leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham just today spoke to the BBC, denying that he wants to turn Syria into an Afghanistan-style scenario. Are you optimistic, given what you've said about there not being women involved at the table in many of these decisions, that will be possible?
There is like in general like a rollback on like women's rights globally. It's like it's everywhere, and this is why. So you can imagine now in a country where it's like we experienced like 54 years of dictatorship. So I think there is the concerns are valid, and we, as I mentioned, we need to see like actions, not words. And until now, there is no. I'm not that optimistic when it comes to that, like having women in leadership. But like, who knows? Just like as I said, like we need to be vigilant to protect like our rights and to claim also our space in Syria's future.
And just before you go, are there groups in Syria that are pushing for that who could be helpful in making that a reality?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of organizations and initiatives on the ground. They are supporting women's participation and women leadership in Syria. It's not only the Syrian women's political movement, but we have like a Syrian lobby. We have also a Syrian women's network. We have Madaniya, and just like today, we have a protest in Damascus, in the center of Damascus, where women ask for where women rejected also the current situation where there is no a seat for women in the current government that we have. So women already on the ground protesting, and also the civil society is pushing for more, and also to protect women's rights. So it's gonna be like the question for the future, and also for all of those who are working in politics and shaping Syria's future. But yeah, we need to keep working on and keeping our rights in the center of Syria's politics, and also be vigilant for everything, and to push for matching words with actions.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on DW. That is Muzna Dureid, Syrian Women's Political Movement.